The lake. The long-distance bus rode out of New York City. It drove for a few hours and entered the mountainous area. The summer resorts appeared in front of them one after the other. After passing a slope of white wild asters, the bus stopped at a castle-like building. It was the Lakeside Resort. Nina and Ai-ling were both night students in New York City who had regular secretarial jobs during the day. They didn't have to go waiting on tables at the resorts to earn their tuition, but Sean suggested that they go up to the resort in the mountains to spend their vacations and also to earn some money there as he and his friends did. He said he would look for opportunities for them, but once he found positions, they had to keep their promise to go, and before they went up, they should strengthen their arm muscles because waiting on tables meant lifting trays of dishes. "We'll play more tennis," they promised him. When Sean called, Nina and Ai-ling quit their jobs and took the bus to the resort. When they got off the bus, Xingxian was already waiting there. "You come just in time. There are a lot of new guests arriving tonight, and you have to work right away." "We've never waited on tables before." Nina and Ai-ling were both excited and a little nervous. "We'll give you a cram lesson. There's nothing to it," he said. He took them to the dining hall. Looking from the windows, they saw the lake outside was like a picture. Sean and Xiao Yo were talking with an American lady. Xingxian said she was Phyllis, the supervisor of the dining room. Sean came over. He was beaming. "You really came," he said, and introduced Nina and Ai-ling to Phyllis. Phyllis looked at them and said, "Are you familiar with waiting on tables?" "They'll be all right. Just give each of them a table," Sean recommended. "What about all the day customers?" Phyllis said. "We'll handle it," Sean said. By we, he meant Xingxian, Xiao Yo, and his friends Joey and Hannah from the south. As for himself, he was going to be the salad chief and no longer wait on tables. Sean took them to the dorm. They walked along a pasture full of wild flowers. The golden sun was dancing on the grass. "The owner of the resort was famous for his generosity to student workers. He let us earn our tuition here. This year he had pre-meds. Last year we Chinese students earned a good reputation, so Phyllis really trusts us," Sean said. They walked for a long time and arrived at an old building. The room Nina and Ai-ling were sharing smelled moldy and only had 2 beds with old mattresses and a little night table between the beds. "What a shabby dorm," Nina said. "The resort built a new wing and just let the old building deteriorate. It was a guest house before, but the woods are really pretty and the lake is near." Sean said that his good friends from the south, Joey and Hannah, lived in the room next to Nina and Ai-ling, but the door of their room was closed. "I'll show you the lake," Sean said. The lake, which they saw from the dining hall, was immense. It nestled quietly in the mountains. Wildflowers flooded the shores of the lake with a blue sky above, and a few white clouds floated by. Only the engine of the faraway motorboats once in a while disrupted the tranquility. "How beautiful," Ai-ling said. "The inlets behind the woods are even more beautiful and famous for the trout. Some guests stay all summer just for fishing." "Can we go boating?" Ai-ling said. "We'll have plenty of chance to do that. Now we have to go back to the dining hall to set up tonight's banquet. It's very easy to wait on the tables. The guests come here for a vacation. They almost always are in a good mood." It was intense during the first meal. Ai-ling had only 7 guests at her table, Mr. Kaufman with his 2 grandsons, and 2 other couples. They asked Ai-ling where she was going to school. She told them that it was the very first time in her life that she had waited on tables. They were very kind, and Mr. Kaufman said that he had waited tables when he was in college. They walked in the moonlight back to their dorm. Sean asked Nina and Ai-ling how it went. "It's a unique experience," Nina said. "The guests were awfully kind, especially Mr. Kaufman," Ai-ling said. "He sat at my table last summer," Sean said. Nina and Ai-ling lay on their mattresses with loose strings. The moon shone quietly from the window. Both were tired, but couldn't fall asleep. "Hoo, hoo, hoo," there was crying from the lake. "Nina, did you hear someone crying?" Eileen said. "It's not human. Some kind of animal or bird. Do you think it's worth it to quit our jobs and come up here?" "I don't know," Eileen said. "We're already here. But it's pretty here. Maybe we should just think we're on vacation." They got up and went to the dining room early the next morning, but some early rising guests were already there for breakfast. Mr. Kaufman and his grandsons were there also. He said they were taking the boat out after breakfast. Eileen told him that they heard some strange calling last night. "Oh, it must be the loons," Mr. Kaufman said. He said the loons were water birds, and they stayed in pairs and called during the night. He said if Nina and Eileen were interested, he could take them for a boat ride. They asked Sean whether it was all right to go boating with Mr. Kaufman. Sean said he had gone fishing with Mr. Kaufman last summer. He had a nice, comfortable boat, and he had come to this resort for years, even before his wife had died. Monday it was overcast. Nina and Eileen went fishing with Mr. Kaufman and his grandsons in the afternoon. The whole lake and trees seemed to be enveloped in a thin veil of fog. He took the boat to a quiet inlet. He and his grandsons put down fishing lines. Mr. Kaufman took out his binoculars. All of a sudden he said, "The loons." He handed the binoculars quickly to Eileen and pointed in the direction. Through the lens she saw 2 gray and black birds with white spots. They were floating quietly on the water. "Maybe what you heard that night was them," Mr. Kaufman said. He looked in the direction of the pair of loons in silence. His white hair was against the gray water. Eileen gave the binoculars to Nina. Then she passed them to Mr. Kaufman's grandsons and back to Eileen. The 2 loons swam closely to each other, quietly floating on the water. It was pre-dawn. Sean knocked on Nina and Eileen's door. "Let's go see the sunrise," he whispered through the door. He had promised that he would take them to see the sunrise the night before. Nina turned on her bed and went back to sleep. Eileen opened the door. The fresh, cold air woke her up completely. She told Sean in the dark, "Nina couldn't wake up." "Well, then let's go, otherwise we'll miss it," he said. They walked into the dark woods. The light of her flashlight followed his. She heard Sean's breathing and the sound of their footsteps on the path. At the end of the woods they came to the shallow side of the lake. The dark sky had only a crescent moon. Slowly on the mountain range of the eastern sky there was a faint light. It enlarged and revealed the pale green blue behind the overlapping mountain ranges. Then millions of golden rays reflected on the tiny golden waves near the shore. They sat by the lake and bathed in the pure lights in silence. The more business the resort had, the busier they were. Sean and others were doubling their workload. Only Nina and Eileen still had 1 table each. "Joey and Hannah are going to the city tomorrow. I'm going with them. Can you 2 take over for the day for Hannah?" Sean asked Eileen and Nina. "Fine," they said. When they went back to the dorm that night, Sean, Joey, and Hannah were not back. They were tired from the extra work and went to sleep early. Early the next morning, Sean knocked on the door. Nina wasn't up. Eileen followed him once more through the woods to the lake. The sun was already up, but the ground was still wet with dew. Sean looked tired. "Can you work a few more days for Hannah?" "Is she sick?" Eileen asked. "She went for an abortion yesterday. Now she must rest and can't lift heavy things." Joey and Hannah were so much in love. How could she go for an abortion? "Joey is going for his PhD in the fall, and Hannah hasn't gotten her master's yet, and they don't have any savings. They finally decided to have an abortion, and they were really depressed and didn't want anyone else to know." Sean looked depressed himself. "I've thought things through," he said. "If I want to stay in America, I have to get a degree that can provide me with a steady job. I can't think of anything else." He turned his back toward Eileen. "A man will never make his loved ones suffer because of him," he said. "Do you understand?" He turned around and gazed at Eileen, and then he got up and left by himself. Hannah came back to work several days later. She thanked Nina and Eileen, but they didn't mention anything else. The door to Joey and Hannah's room was always closed, and Nina and Eiling went back to their leisurely routine of waiting on one table. During lunchtime, Mr. Kaufman asked whether Nina and Eiling would go fishing with him again. Nina said she was too tired, so Eiling went with him and his grandsons. He moored his boat on the quiet side of the lake. "Look," he handed Eiling the binoculars. There they were, the loons, and behind them were 3 baby loons. Eiling yelled out with excitement. Mr. Kaufman looked happy. He threw in the fish line. "This Chinese student, Sean," he said. "Last year I sat at his table, and he came fishing with me also." "He's the most talented one in our group," Eiling said. "I talked to him yesterday, and we talked about you. He said you liked the lake a lot." "I do," Eiling said. "He says he likes it a lot too," Mr. Kaufman said. "He's a fine young man. He seems to want you to be happy." Eiling continued to look at the baby loons through the binoculars. At night, Sean told the others to wait for him at the slope. There was only the crescent moon, but the night sky was full of stars. The dark lake water was green and deep and quiet. In a little while, Sean came with his turtleneck sweater in his hand. He shelled out 7 napkin-wrapped filet mignons and a bottle of steak sauce. He handed each of them a piece of the steak. Eiling heard him say to Joey, "This one is for Hannah. It's rare and good for the blood." "How did you get this?" Xingxian asked him. "Last time we went to the city, I got a bottle of the best soy sauce in town and gave it to the chef. He didn't know how to use soy sauce. Now everybody loves his steak. So he gave me 7 pieces of filet mignon today just to say thanks. I put the steaks in my turtleneck sweater and tied the sleeves, and here they are." "Well, this is the first time we have celebrated," Xingxian said. "Remember last year we went to the other hotels to look for other Chinese students and went to the horse races?" "This year the most important thing is saving money," Sean said. "No more wasting time going everywhere." He sat beside Eiling and his eyes shone. "Did you have a good time fishing with Mr. Kaufman?" "Yes, I did, and we saw the loons again and 3 baby loons," Eiling said. "They now have a family." Joey and Hannah suddenly stood up. Hannah said she was tired and wanted to go back to the dorm to rest. The rest of them talked under the starlight until the wee hours of the morning, because there wouldn't be many more of these gatherings. In another 2 weeks it would be Labor Day. On the dark lake there was a storm. Eiling was at the bottom of the lake. The loons were crying. They were looking for their baby loons. "Hoo, hoo, hoo!" The loons were crying. Eiling opened her eyes and found she was lying in her bed. She had had a nightmare. But there was crying. It was from Joey and Hannah's room. Hannah was crying bitterly. The long Labor Day weekend was busier than ever. There were so many guests. Even Nina and Eiling each had to handle 2 extra tables. Their arms were sore, but they had a stack of small bills for tips. After the 3 busy days, the summer work ended officially. They again sat on the slope. The main hall of the resort loomed in the clear moonlight. The lake in front of them was like a dark mirror. Early the next morning they would go back to the city. Joey and Hannah would immediately return to their school in the south. Joey said to Sean, "If you decide to come to our school and study engineering from the beginning, just send your transcript to our department. But to give up the literature you studied for so long, isn't that a waste?" "Well, I didn't know you were going to leave New York," Xiao Yo said to Sean. "How come you didn't tell us?" Sean was silent. Under the moonlight, Joey and Hannah's hair shone, touching. Eiling looked at Sean. He was looking at her. The moon was shining in his eyes, and it was shining in the dark lake behind him. A sudden wind blew, and it had the chill of autumn. "Hoo, hoo, hoo!" From the lake, Eiling heard the loons crying.